Hey, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. Glad you're here. We promise to give you an entertaining discussion about the end times. We don't promise to have all the answers, but there's a lot of fun stuff in the Bible. So we thought, hey, let's talk about it. Let's see if we can learn some things. And to help us dig a little bit deeper on the topic of the Millennium, Heaven, and the New Jerusalem, we decided to bring a good friend, Doug Krieger, on. Many of you know him already. He is a fellow author. We did a book together. He's also written many of his own books, and he can tell you all about those. So, Brother Doug, we are so glad that you're here, and it's really wonderful to have you on the show, man. So
It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. I hope
Yeah.
that we have a great show. I'm looking forward.
Awesome. Where can people find your stuff if they're interested?
They can find my stuff at, of course, at our commonwealthofisrael.com at the blogs, or commonwealthofisrael.org is easier to find me on the blog there.
Okay.
Commonwealthofisrael.org or
Very cool.
commonwealththeology.com.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, those are
Commonwealth
two.
something.
Yeah.
All right. So we're looking at this topic of the millennium, heaven, the New Jerusalem. Now, a lot of people think that, okay, once the tribulation is over or life is over, it's heaven, right? We default to that. But there is this thing in Scripture. It's 1,000-year period, hence millennium. And the Bible, well, at first glance, doesn't seem to have a lot to talk about. But then when you dig a little bit deeper, like, whoa, there's actually a lot in here. And then we find some things that seem to upset our apple cart, such as sacrifices, a temple, right? That these things are happening during the millennium. Apparently people are having kids, but some people aren't having kids. And then there's going to be a big rebellion at the end of this whole thing. Doug, what is your experience been? What is your understanding, I should say, of the millennium? Like, why do we have a millennium? What do you think God's purpose is behind the millennium? What kind of activities are happening? What's the earth like? I don't know. Kind of give us your rundown. And then
my
dig
take
into it.
on it is fairly traditional, I guess, because I come from a dispensational background. However, it's been radically changed now that we've adopted this theological system of both ecclesiology and eschatology, and that is that it is a literal 1,000-year period. It's a Sabbath rest. I think that the most of the credible rabbis of days gone by, as well as the so-called early church fathers, and believe that there was 6 days. One day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, and that man's days would be 6,000 years from the creation of Adam. We're approaching the terminus of that 6,000 years. I wrote a book one time entitled "Signs in the Heavens and on the Earth: Man's Days Are Numbered, and He is Measured," and but it deals with that 6,000-year time frame using the chronologies in the Scripture. And but then there's the seventh day, and then on the seventh day God rested after His creation, and we're going to rest as well. So it's a literal expression of the on the earth. And of course, you and I, Doug, we believe that in Peter's epistle, that there is in 2 Peter, I believe, there's no break between the time of judgment and the actual new heavens and new earth. That new heavens and renewed heavens and earth takes place at the terminus of the 6,000 years, and we go right into right there. If you can find a gap in between this time of judgment and the new heavens and the new earth, you're a better man than I, Gungadi.
Let me read this for people. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. So how do you read that, Doug? Like, what is that saying? Then we'll let Scott get in.
Mhm. Well, actually, I mean, it just on face value, the thief in the night, that has to do, I believe, with the second coming of Christ,
Okay.
the day of the Lord, and the heavens and the will pass away with a great
Hmm.
noise, and the elements will melt with a fervent heat, just like it says. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. And then it says, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with a fervent heat.
Hmm.
Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heaven, new heavens, and a new earth in which righteousness dwells.
Hmm.
And that there's no gap between that. In other words, the ones who claim that the new heaven or the renewed heaven and the renewed earth will take place at the end of the seventh day.
Keep going,
That's
Don. Keep going.
probably
Keep
what's his
going.
face.
Keep going.
Okay, that that will happen at the close of the seventh day, and I affirm that that there will be a judgment, and there's no gap there. It just goes right into um, this. Nevertheless, according to his promise, we look for a new heavens and new earth in which righteousness dwells. And
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, so I mean, I mean, I'm not going to die on that hill, but I'm going to say that it makes a lot more sense rather than postponing
Hmm.
the renewed heavens and the renewed earth. I mean, look at it this way. We just went through. I've got a thing called the three prophetic wars: the Oracle of Damascus, the Gog Magog conflagration at the beginning and at the end of the Book of Revelation, and then we've gone through this Armageddon campaign. The Valley of Megiddo, the whole thing, and the whole world is involved in war and carnage, and all these things are going down in Revelation, all these judgments, and one third of this and one third of that. And basically, the earth is a mess. Okay. And so Messiah will put it all together. I mean, his millennial reign and rule is not going to be a salvage operation. He's going to be able to put it all together again and renew it so that this will be a true Sabbath rest for the people of God and for the earth and everyone who is on the earth at this time. So it says in Zechariah chapter 14, the last chapter in Zechariah, that all they who came up against Jerusalem will come up from year to year to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. So those peoples who were against Jerusalem are going to repopulate uh, the um, the earth during that's time of Sabbath rest. And I would hasten to add that I do believe that there's a literal chapter here on Ezekiel chapter 37, in which, if you read Ezekiel 37, you're going to find out that there's going to be one nation under one king. This is where uh, Ephraim and Judah are united together as one stick in the hand of the Lord. And then it says, "My servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children's children will live there forever. And David, my servant, will be their prince forever."
Mm.
That hasn't happened yet, but that
Hmm.
will happen. I
Hmm.
will make a covenant of peace. I believe that's the extension of the new covenant with them. And between them, it will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their number, and I will put my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy when my sanctuary is among them forever. So I think this begins the millenarian rule and reign of the son of David. And that we believe is the Messiah, who is of the tribe of Judah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's of the seed of David, and that he is going to rule and reign on this earth during that period of time, and he's going to bring us to. I guess Scott's got a comment here.
All right.
I was going to just ask you to pull the text up, and I'm not going to disagree with you. It is on that day. But just as Peter has pointed out earlier in verse 8, that a day with the Lord is just as 1,000 years. I believe a lot of stuff is happening at the beginning of that day. There's a lot of wrath being poured out. There's there's a gathering of the elect. There's the Bema Seat judgment. There's the sheep and goats judgment. There's his touching down on Mount of Olives, literally, the wedding feast, and then you've got the carrion birds feasting, etc. So I believe all that is happening at the very beginning of that seventh day. But I mean, if we take sort of if we look at this, and again, I'm not saying some of this is not symbolic, and it could be at the beginning of the day, but we've got the elements melting as if and I'm not saying Yah can't totally protect those of the nations, those of Judah that had not taken the mark and worshiped the image of the beast, and yet they will be saved through what I believe the bowls of wrath period, and those that will populate. But he would have to do something supernaturally to protect them from what's being described in First Peter. There, you've got elements melting, burning up. So I personally believe this is at the very end of that day. It's the same day. I'm just putting it at the end of the day and this would be the event that actually does take us into the eternal state, if you will. In other words, that eighth day, there is no eighth day. So after the seventh day of rest, I'm not going to pick too much on y'all using the millennium tonight, but I just like to now use the seventh day versus the common lingo. When that day is complete and over, I believe that's what Peter is referring to is the very end of that day. Then there will literally be not even a renewed creation or a renewed heavens. It will be all new at that point in time when Jesus, Yeshua, turns everything back over to the Father outside of time. And then we don't know what happens after that, y'all. We might
let me, if I could jump in. So I mean, of course, the word kainos, whether it's new or renewed, is an interesting discussion, no question about that. But the point that I think is important, I think Doug Krieger believes that as well, but I'll let him speak for himself, is that God is into restoration. And the way I was always taught when I was growing up about the new heavens and earth is that God pretty much takes dynamite to planet Earth and blows it up. and then he creates a new one, right? And to me, that seems rather defeatist. It almost seems like Satan wins. I mean, we're going to have new bodies, and yet it's still going to be me, right? It's still whatever makes up me, but just in a much better form, right? So, I think that there's something beautiful about that. And of course, many of us don't like certain aspects of our bodies, but when we have a perfect body, we're going to be totally happy with whoever we are and whatever we look like, but it'll still be, in essence, it will still be me and it'll still be you, of course. And that's what I think is important about the earth, is that the very earth, this earth, the one that we're on today, is not going to go away. It's not blowing up. It's going to be here, right? So this, of course, then begs the question, when do the heavens pass away? Well, I think we're told very, very clearly in the book of Revelation that Jesus is going to come and he's going to, the sky is going to recede like a scroll. That is the heavens passing away. Why would the elements melt with fervent heat? Because when you take away the force field, here comes Jesus with a face brighter than the sun, right? And we saw what happened when he came down on Mount Sinai, right? It started to melt, started to burn, right? And so we're going to have a similar type of thing happening at his second coming. And so then the earth, Now, exactly when this happens, I would suggest that, you know, at the end of this age, we have some incredibly cataclysmic events, right? And
Oh,
then
yes.
all of that is finalized. And then whenever he speaks the word, that will be the beginning of the seventh day, right? And that is when the earth is going to be transformed and it's going to be restored. And let me take us to Romans chapter 8, because this is where Paul tells us when the earth is going to be restored. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing, notice there, the revealing of the sons of God, right? So when are we revealed? Well, at the resurrection. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. The whole creation groans and labors with birth pains together until now. And notice, not only that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. So the earth is waiting for its redemption. It's going to be liberated from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the sons of God. So that's why that's definitely why I hold it. I think that is why our brother Doug Krieger holds that as well. But Scott, please.
I was just going to say on that again, I believe the entropy process there will certainly be slowed down. But if we're going to take the text seriously, even in Isaiah, I think it's 65 or 66, it says it'll be rare. There will still be death. There will still be corruption. Otherwise, you would not have humanoids. They are still going to have to do work in this earth. I do believe, as y'all said, there will be a reversal of the entropy process. In other words, it will be rare if someone doesn't make it to 100 versus wearing out at, I'm going to go up to 95 for you, Krieger. You know,
thanks very much. I was given 21 years by the World Bank, but then again, the World Bank.
So versus most of us wearing out at 70 to 80 years old. I mean, Krieger's an anomaly right now. But
it's so wonderful to be an anomaly. Yeah.
But again, Mr. Krieger, if in the Millennium, you'd be a fried chicken right now. And so again,
I know it. I would just be, man, I'm telling you.
I do not see this complete eternal state. And Doug, you mentioned the heavens being rendered open. There's a difference between them being rendered open versus them melting with fervent heat. I mean, we're talking, this is like a reconstruction, recreation event at what I believe. And again, as you said, Mr. Krieger, I'm not staking my status in the kingdom or my entry level therein too on this at all. This is just the way I see it. I don't even see the New Jerusalem until the very, very end, because where is that Ezekiel 40-48 temple? I mean, I believe there's going to be an Ezekiel 40-48 temple. Where in the heck is it if you've got this big old monstrosity of a New Jerusalem? Seems like nobody can.
Oh, well, I think that's a very important thing you're bringing up there, Scott. That's extremely vital, because are there two holy cities? The heavenly Jerusalem descending, and then Ezekiel 40 through 48 that you're bringing. Are there two new covenants? Are there
no? No. There's only one covenant.
Okay, good. Now we're talking. Okay, now when Nathanael came to Jesus in John chapter 1, he was asked the same question, like with Peter. Well, who do you say I am? And he said, "You are." If you read the whole thing, you are the Son of the living God, and you are the King of Israel. Well, the Son of the living God is a heavenly expression in its phraseology, because he came from heaven, the Son of God. Okay. And then, but he is the King of Israel. That's very much on the earth. So now my thing and thinking is that we have to think of the holy city, the same description, holy city, that it's multidimensional. It has a heavenly expression and it has an earthly expression. And what ties them together is Jacob's ladder. ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And heaven and earth are brought together in Messiah. That is the breaking of the dimensional divide takes place during that millennial rest. That's my conviction. Otherwise, we wind up with two covenants. We wind up with a plan for the church and a plan for Israel.
No, I agree with you.
And all this, right?
I believe the New Jerusalem is in a sense extra dimensional, if you will.
Yeah, of course. That's the same conviction.
Other dimensional. It's literal, but I don't believe during the millennium it's sitting there on that landmass.
Oh, I do.
Because here's the reason why, Doug. No one can enter it at all
unless they have a body.
You've got people from other nations migrating to Israel, and no matter if they're not from a DNA tribe, wherever they choose to live, they get to live in the land. And they're farming and they're tending their flocks and they're doing whatever people do in the millennium. Well, and you've got this New Jerusalem sitting down on top of it.
But what do you do, Scott, with Zechariah chapter 14, where it says everyone who came up against Jerusalem will come up from year to year to celebrate the Feast of the Tabernacle? That sure sounds like a bunch of people from the nation.
I'm agreeing with you that this New Jerusalem would be extra dimensional versus, I believe the Ezekiel 40:48 temple is literally in the Jerusalem on this, no doubt, sort of a restored earth, but not not a total recreated earth. And that is what the nations are coming to. They're coming to the Ezekiel 40-48 temple. They would not be coming to the New Jerusalem, the temple that's described in Revelation 21 and 22. But again,
my view on that is simply this, okay? Based upon the math, and I'm not going to get into the math.
Make my head hurt.
So I look at the expression, the Son of God, the King of Israel, bringing together these two dimensions, in Christ, in the Messiah. That to me is such a glory to the Lord, and that the nations can come up to Jerusalem from year to year. They're enjoined to do so. Otherwise, there's a price to pay if they don't, and no rain and all that. And so I guess I'm a literalist, but I'm also I believe that the expression on the earth of David and of all the tribes together, and of the what do we call the Milo Hagoyim, the nations, the expression of the nations, and of Ephraim uniting together with Judah on that day as one stick in the hand of the Lord, and that my servant, who I believe is the Messiah, is the expression of the Messiah, the Son of David, is going to be ruling and reigning on the earth. Now, there are some who believe that they have a hard time thinking that twirling around for 1,000 years up there
on the Death
is
Star.
New Jerusalem. Now,
yeah,
where's that?
The New Jerusalem Death Star.
So, it's gone. Okay.
Which we did.
Yeah.
Again,
1 second.
I believe Messiah is going to be literally on the earth during this time period.
Yeah.
Right, we do. Now, let me ask you this question. Okay, if Messiah is on the earth, then where in the world are we? Where in the world are we? Okay, so the key thing is this. Are we not the New Jerusalem? Are we not the woman? Are we not the people of God have now been brought into that New Jerusalem experience, right?
I would say yes, but I would not exclude those during the millennium that put their faith from obviously being part of the ultimate eternal plan.
There's a really good answer for that. Okay, so in Revelation 22, it says, "Blessed are those who
what
do
is
his
the
commandments." Answer? So the answer is, it says, "Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. But outside are dogs, sorcerers, sexually immoral, murderers, idolaters." Right. And then in 21, it says, no unclean thing can enter. Right. So in 21, it's talking about only those who have been totally transformed, okay, can actually go in to the city, right? So that's super important here. I think got the same thing. Here we go. So, but there shall by no means enter anything that defiles or is caused an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So you cannot go into the New Jerusalem unless you have a new body, right? If you are still mortal, you don't get to go in. And I think something else that we need to talk about, because if I'm maybe sensing you correctly, Scott, is that you're kind of thinking this city is way too big. It's going to take up way too much space. And I really think that we have looked at the New Jerusalem with the wrong perspective. We think there's going to be this cube that's 1,400 miles in every direction, but that is not what the text says. One second. Hold on, one second.
Oh, okay.
So it's about 1,380, and if we look at ancient texts, for example, when Herodotus talks about the city of Babylon, he talks about it being, my gosh, what is it, 30 something miles? All right, it's not 30 something miles on every wall, right? Every side. It's a sum total of all those. So if we look at the New Jerusalem as being a pyramid shape, which is more of a mountain shape, and then there are 8 edges on a pyramid, that gives us an average of about 193 miles per edge. And that is something that the ancient rabbis had already been thinking about. They were suggesting that the length of the New Jerusalem would be from Jerusalem to about Damascus, which is about 132, 140 miles. So it's in the ballpark there. And it's definitely much more of a structure that would actually fit on the earth, right? It's not completely out of whack with Earth's, size. It's still huge. It's still 30 times taller than Mount Everest. Okay. So this thing is gigantic, right? It's just absolutely enormous, but it is something that is reasonable within the current size and shape of the earth. So I think there's a lot of good explanations as to why this thing is on the earth, why it should be on the earth. It makes much more sense in my mind, and of course our brother Krieger, that we're going to have a renewed earth, or a restored earth, I think is one way to look at it. It just fits really well, because otherwise, again, after what Doug said, is that the earth has been absolutely destroyed, plastered, devastated. Are you going to leave it in that state, or does God need to do something? So either way, you have to do a massive cleanup program. Why not just, fix it at the beginning and get it done with?
In fact, that's why I say in Daniel 12, it says that the end of desolations is 1,290 days, right? And then it says, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335th day, which is 45 days from the days of desolation. Now, I have a theory. It's a theory, okay? Because, Vernon McGee said, you want to know what the 1,290 days is all about and what the 1,335 days is all about? And he says, I've got the answer. I have no way of knowing this. He said. But those 45 days, I think, are critical in the world's adjustment and renewal during that time of Messiah's entry into it. And that, he's preparing, he's doing a major cleanup job. I mean, he could just do everything but a snap of his finger. I mean, grief, if we look at it that. But we are blessed by the coming of the Son of David, of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords at that time. The judgment, the wrath of God is over. And now we're entering into that period of time of the final transition into the seventh day. That's the way I look at it. Anyway, I could be wrong, but there it is.
Brother Scott.
And again, where I'm agreeing with you, but somewhat quibbling, is I think you hit on it, Mr. Krieger. I think you hit on it when you said Yeshua is the connection between the heavens and the earth. Okay,
Right.
So in other words, I'm not saying there's not a literal New Jerusalem. Okay. I just believe that connection has been restored during the seventh day. So even the little still minions like us that are still in our humanoid bodies might be able to do exactly sort of what Doug had said. If they're cleansed of their sins, And you know, and again, that can get us to the point of why would there be sacrifices in the Ezekiel through 40 through 48 temple?
Sure.
And Doug, you probably didn't watch it, but that was something that this guy that teaches that Yeshua's up there doing heavenly cow sacrifices right now. He's like, well, there's sin sacrifices in the millennium, obviously during Ezekiel 40 through 48. I personally believe those would be memorials, obviously pointing back to what Yeshua's once and for all sacrifice for sin.
Yeah.
And my buddy Curtis Reed has a good little teaching on this, because there's not going to be much death in the millennium. You know, I think we're going to be kings and priests and teachers during the millennium, trying to teach these people how bad it was when Satan ruled the world. In other words, think about it. The enemy is chained. There is no deception during the millennium. You have humans trying to understand what it will, you know, we're kind of, they're not going to have any concept really of what happened prior to this seventh day while they're living out their very, very long lives, if you will, approaching the end. And obviously it shows you the human condition, that even under perfect righteousness, perfect law, perfect instructions, no bad rulings, no bad judges. I mean, somebody commits a crime, King Yeshua knows they did it. There's not, you know, there's not going to be juries of your peers or anything like that. And so again,
you might be out of a job.
Why sacrifices? So I think that's an interesting question to discuss, is why sacrifices?
Yeah, why the sacrifices? Yeah.
I believe they're a memorial looking backward.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I really think that the again, the word atonement is the word kafar. It means to cover. I don't think they're memorial at all. I think that's completely missing the point. I think that would just be a lot of dead animals for nothing. So you have a veil between heaven and earth right now. That veil. Why is there a veil between heaven and earth? Because God is protecting us from himself. God is a consuming fire. Right? And he put himself in a temple to contain his fire. He put a veil between heaven and earth to contain his fire. And we know that when that veil comes down, as we see in 2 Thessalonians 2, chapter 1, it says, to give you who are troubled rest, when the Lord Jesus is revealed, that's the word apocalypse, unveiled, when he's unveiled from heaven with his mighty angels in flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who do not know God. So when he's unveiled, how is he coming? In flaming fire. And we see the same thing in Isaiah 66, verse 15. For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. I mean, we see this fire motif all over the place, right? So I think we have to really take the text seriously and literally and say, okay, God's a consuming fire. So when this veil comes down between heaven and earth, there's no more protection for mortals. Now, those that have the new body, great. But those that don't have a new body, big problem. All right. So the sacrifices during the millennium are for the people who are still flesh and blood mortals, and they don't have their new bodies yet. They have an opportunity to get their new body, but they don't yet have it. All right. I would suggest they probably have to wait. It's hard to say exactly, but based on Isaiah 65, you know, those that are going to die at 100 because they were sinners, you know, maybe there's a waiting period. You've got to wait 100 years, or something happens at 100 where they go from sort of being in a kind of a childlike state, or, you know, your current sins don't quite catch up with you until 100 or something like that. You know, it's hard to say, because I don't feel that we have enough really to go on in that one. But anyway, then what can they do if they want to go up to? If they want to become somebody who can go into the New Jerusalem, what do they have to do? They have to take of the river of life, and they have to take of the trees of life. And the leaves of the tree of life are for
healing
what?
of the nations,
Are for the healing of the nations. If you need to be healed, what does that imply? People are still sick, right? So it doesn't make sense to have the tree of life whose leaves are for the healing of the nations during the eternal state when there are no more sick people, no more death, absolutely none, but during a time when there's still a potential of death. There still needs to be a transformation for people. So that is why I believe this fits so much better within the context of the millennium.
And again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it might be extra dimensional because Yeshua is that ladder, that connection, which will allow even mortals to make that connection into the heavenlies, if you will, and have access to the tree of life. In other words, there's no longer a blocking of the way. The way is now manifest on the throne. And again, I've never really given this deep thought. You know, Doug, I've said this, Doug Hamp, I've said this before. When it comes to millennium and any major debates or disagreements, I like discussions like this, but I am not ever going to argue with somebody about what happens in the millennium, because when we get there, whatever King Yeshua says do,
that's it.
You silly willies. You idiot. Can't you see that was all metaphorical and you can't, and it wasn't literal? And he's going to tell the other side that, can you not read? It was pretty literal, guys. Get over there and do me some
I like John Holler's theory on Revelation 8, where it says that there's silence in heaven for a half hour, giving us all opportunity to adjust our prophetic charts. It takes a half hour to get through them all.
Same way I am on the millennium. I'm trying to worry about what happens in this age right now.
We're having a lot of fun here in the weeds, but why do you think there needs to be a millennium? I mean, what's the whole point of this? Why is Satan put away and then he's let out somehow? I mean, what's up with that?
I believe it shows the condition in the heart of man.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It does that as well. Yes, certainly. Because at the end there's this rebellion, right? And Satan is left coming out of the pit, and you got another Gog situation, and man's heart is revealed that even under a direct rule of righteousness, there is this propensity for rebellion and disobedience, and so it is going to be very revealing. And so there's a final conclusion of the matter that is going to be, and a lot of people say, well, hey, if Jesus were on the earth today, I'd be following him, right? Oh yeah, right. And he gives that example in the Gospels about the man who died, and the great gulf between it. Let me just warn everybody, this place is not good. And there's no way, even if Moses came back from the grave, they still wouldn't believe. And it has to do with the condition of man's heart. So I think Scott's onto something right there. Amen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the case as well, that, God is going to give the people that I think the people that were born into the millennium, I think they need a chance. And I think it really goes back to the Garden of Eden. Why in the world did God put this tree in there that just might trip people up? Because they have to make a choice. And I think this is the ultimate opt-out option. Yeah. Okay. This is the opt-out button, right? And for everyone born during the millennium who says, well, if only I could have my own way, if only I weren't being coerced into having to do things God's way. If only there were a champion that could really lead my cause, and we could do it the way I want to do it. I could do things according to my own wisdom and what's best in my eyes. Then that's what I would do, right? But Jesus is ruling and reigning and ruling with a rod of iron, and I can't exactly do something. So I think this is God's way of saying, okay, you don't have to go my way. I'm not going to force you. And guess what? The last thing I want is for all of you guys, the naysayers, to be stuck with me for eternity. Like, it's just not going to be fun, right? So if you don't want to be part of my kingdom, you don't have to be part of my kingdom. And I'm going to let your champion out, Satan, the adversary, the opponent, who has a better idea that you think is amazing.
Mhm.
And of course, what do we see at the end of the millennium? We see that he's let out and he goes out and he gathers the nations and they come against the beloved city, right?
Yeah.
So let me show that. And I think that the beloved city is none other than the New Jerusalem. Okay.
Mhm.
So they come, they're going to go up against, the New Jerusalem. And it
Which
says
is
that
on the earth.
yeah, their number is as the sand of the sea. There's a lot of these guys. All right.
Right.
And, and they're not happy. And then it says fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. So the way I would put this together is, why does fire suddenly come down? I suggest that the people that were covered by these millennial sacrifices, they have 1 year. And in fact, it says in Daniel chapter 7, it says, as for the rest of the beasts, they had their lives prolonged for a season and a time, right? So a time is 1 year, right? So the season is when they're put into the millennium, or to the abyss for a millennium. And then they're let out for 1 year. They're going to stir everybody up. And it's going to be from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur that they are getting ready. And then they finally charge against the city. They're going to, make their last stand, and they're going to go into the gates of the city, and we're going to defile this city. And just as they think they're like about to cross the threshold, the clock runs out. The millennial, or I should say the Yom Kippur sacrifice, the efficacy of that sacrifice runs out. It's gone. Psh, this covering that had been protecting them disappears. And then they are finally exposed to the fire of God, and it consumes them. I think it's a much more elegant way to look at it. I think it doesn't put God in this bad place of, well, I'm going to torch you guys. I think he's like, you guys can make your choice and it's all going to work out. Trust me. But you're not going to like the results.
And that fits in with 1 Corinthians 15, talking about Yeshua, the first fruits, the first of the resurrection, those at his coming, then the end. So there is a resurrection at the end of this age, this time period, if you will, the great white throne judgment. Right. So in other words, there ain't no more living people. There's a bunch of people, and those people at the very end that we know their destination, but then there's the great white throne judgment when the books are open. And that's the final judgment seat, if you will, of eternity. And then, because I kind of believe the lake of fire would be something that would be eternal, not like a Dante's Inferno Roman Catholic nonsense type of stuff. But it ain't somewhere you want to end up. I'll put it that way. Whether or not you're eternally snuffed out or eternally tormented, which I don't necessarily believe that, but I'm not going to argue with anybody too hard on it. When we get there, okay, we can fight about it, But I'm hoping not to
roast you for eternity.
Well, again, I that's one of those things that people want to, it's fun to discuss, but the eternal fires of hell versus.
Well, you know what? I think we really, I think what is really important here, bros, is this. We're assuming we had a little fellowship before we started this program this evening that we assume that everybody is into a literal millennium. Now, there are many who believe that we're already in the millennium.
If we are, it sucks.
That the devil is already in the pit with one hellaciously long chain that he gets out.
He's gonna wait.
A roaring.
He's not. That's just it, Doug. Yeah, he's not really the god of this world that's roaring around like a prowling lion. But he's on a celestial chain roaring around like a.
He's on this chain. And the thing of it is that every time you go through a world war, you begin to realize, you know what? I think that if this is the millennium, then man, let me out of here. I mean,
what about our brothers and sisters in North Korea right now, or in Iran, or places?
Our brother in Nigeria. 5,000 martyrs every year. That is literal. And I've been there and I've seen the people who've survived martyrdom. They've got things around their, I mean, they cut off their ears, their nose, their tongues, and they're so pleasant in the Lord. I mean, I'm talking suffering. Okay. So our dear beloved brethren who believe that we're already in the millennium, I think that they have an issue of the kingdom now. They believe that that Christ is reigning on the earth in the here and now
through the church.
Church, right? And that we're not looking forward to the millennium.
Well, we're doing a crappy job
already. Now, what do we think about all of that, brethren?
That's crazy. We're doing a horrible job if we're actually ruling and reigning at this time. Let's go build our 7 mountain mandates.
No kidding. Yeah, we're doing a really crappy job.
Can I give our brother Gavin a plug real quick? Hey, and I hope he listens to this. Gavin, I love you, brother. You know, I really don't want to talk prophecy with you anymore. But on this issue, your concern about the 7 mountain mandate and this kingdom now drivel nonsense is 100% correct. And hear me, Gavin, hear me loud and clear. I do not believe that crap. I don't teach that crap. That crap is Roman Catholic leaven nonsense straight from the pits of hell. And it's infected many of Rome's daughters, and that's where they get it from. They just never unlearned that Roman Catholic nonsense that Rome is the church and rules and reigns on the earth, and it's got a vicar Antichrist as its head. And that's what's coming at the end of this stage, my brother. Again, I'm talking to Gavin right now, everybody. So he has every right to slap me upside the head and hit me in the nose and give me a bloody nose if I ever teach kingdom now crap. And that's what it is, guys, because it's going to lead to deception. I'm sorry. I'm very rarely that like stern, but that is going to be part of the great falling away and the great deception, in my opinion.
Ooh, that's heavy duty. We've got some issues right here in River City right now on this, and I'm not kidding you. So the kingdom now, brethren. Okay, here's the thing. We're all saved by the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, I mean, He's our oneness. We've got differences of opinions on a lot of different issues. Okay. And these various factions within the body of Messiah are there, and they're necessary to be there. I believe it says that in First Corinthians chapter 11, verses 17 and 18. It says that I hear there are divisions among you, and there are these differences, and it's necessary that there be these differences, as some translations have it, so that they that are approved of God might be made manifest. Now, I'm just saying this. We have a lot of different factions in the body of Messiah, okay? And yet we need to have brethren to bring us together, not in a compromising way, but to center us on the person and work of Messiah. That's where we have our real ultimate oneness in him. And I think that we need to stress that again and again as an answer to our Lord's Prayer in John 17, that they all may be one. Okay. And he prayed that prayer, and I believe he's going to get an answer and is getting an answer to that prayer. So we have these huge differences, even of the literal millennium versus we're in it right now, an ethereal millennium. And we can fight about these things, but I guarantee you that if you're standing in front of a gigantic sword and you come from a Catholic tradition, or you're a Baptist, or you're a Pentecostal, you're not going to worry about the details. You're going to be concerned the fact that you're naming the name of Christ, and that's going to cost you a lot right then and there. And I think some of our brethren in Nigeria are experiencing that under persecution. It's an amazement to me as to how one we can become, because we're all naming the name of the Nazarene, and we're all in trouble. So, but it's not that we can't discuss these things. In fact, I really enjoy doing this with Scott and you, Doug, because it energizes me and gets me going. And there's a lot of folks today everything that can be shaken is being shaken we're going through a whole lot of shaking, and we're all sitting here on the verge of another world war, as if we're not even, thinking that we're in a total economic collapse. I could go on, only God knows, right? Jeez, I tell you.
Real quick, you probably remember, Doug Hamp probably remembers. Remember Hogan's Heroes? You had Colonel Klink, who was truly oblivious to what's going on. Okay, that's the people. That would be the majority that are programmed by Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. They are actually oblivious. Then you've got the others like Sergeant Schultz. He sees what's going on, but he doesn't want to see it. Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. So you've got the absolute oblivious people. Then you've got the Sergeant Schultzes who are like, I see nothing. And then you've got us like watchers on the wall, prophets, if you will, screaming from the ramparts and from the city walls, going, "Open your eyes, get your fingers out of your ears."
Yeah. I always have a good time with the people that go off on Matthew 24. Well, no man knows the day or the hour, and then okay. Now you don't know the day or the hour. What are we talking about here? It's about this. If the master of the house protecting the temple, I would assume, would have known when the thief was coming, he'd have been ready. He'd have been prepared, right? So it wasn't that the people in Noah's day did not know the day or the hour, as it was in the days of Noah. So shall it also be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. They what were they doing? They were marrying and giving in marriage. They were buying and selling and so forth and so on. And then all of a sudden,
Sergeant Schultz,
right? Yeah, Schultz.
They were Sergeant Schultz. I'm telling you, dude, or Colonel Klink.
Hey, it wasn't that they didn't know. They didn't want to know.
Exactly.
They didn't care about knowing. Don't bother me with the details.
Mr. Krieger, you stole my thunder earlier where you talked about the 7-day plan and 6,000 years. You really think it was coincidence that Noah entered the ark in his 600th year and he was there in the ark until he turned 601?
That's another coinkadink.
I mean, let's say,
I like Isaac, that one. That's a good one, Scott.
He got married when he was 40, and then he didn't have his twins for 20 years later. He didn't have Israel. Jacob wasn't birthed until Isaac was 60. Probably just, I don't know. God's just probably, coinciding again.
Yeah. See, we're moving into those numbers again, Hamp, so look out.
But mine are simple. 4 and 2 and 1.
Hey, I just got into the 6 cities of refuge, and I had a blast with them.
Hey, Mr. Krieger, they're 100% topological. There's not one number in Scripture that doesn't mean something.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And God is absolute, and so are numbers. And He doesn't mess around with the numbers. That's why we got 6 days, and we have that Sabbath coming up, and we ought to enter right now in our spirit. We have that rest in Him, and there's going to be a literal, here's the thing, and I talk with a lot of my 7 Mountain brothers who believe that we're living in the kingdom now. And I just say, well, I think better days are ahead of us, quite frankly.
Gotta hope so, man.
Yeah, I would hope so, and so I see a new heaven and a new earth, and I rejoice. And I think that as we go on to I think God's people are going to get really desperate. That I believe is going to happen. I even say right now, these revivals that seem to be breaking out in different places, and this new movie that's coming out tomorrow, the Jesus Revolution, with Kelsey Grammer playing Chuck Smith. By the way, I was there, being that I'm the Forrest Gump of Christendom. I was there at those revivals with Chuck Smith. Well, you were down there, Doug, for many years at Calvary Chapel, right? And I don't know if they were thinking of making that movie at that time when you were there, but I'm glad it's coming out. And I think there's a consciousness, there's a final reaping of the harvest. I do believe in that this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. And I'm a firm believer in that. At least it'll be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. And so even in the midst of all the negativity, all the sadness and the trauma and the persecution and whatnot, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world, and then the end will come. So we're close to that, brothers. We're very close to that.
Something about the millennium, assuming it's a more of a literal millennium. And I did a debate some years ago against some people that take it very metaphorical and such.
Metaphysical, actually.
And metaphysical, metaphorical, whatever, allegorical, however they want to look at it. I was like, what about the animals? It says that the lion's going to lie down with, not the lamb, but with the calf, and the wolf's going to lie down with the lamb. I mean, that sounds pretty cool. That sounds like really a nice place, and your little kids can go play by the viper's den and nothing's going to happen. Like that definitely cannot happen today. I don't recommend you go and try it. It's not going to work out well. I just saw some lady in Florida got eaten by an alligator, or at least attacked by one. And
really,
so clearly Florida is not the promised land. Okay.
No, how could that be in the millennium?
There's all kinds of reasons not to live in Florida, but that's okay.
That's right.
They can have it, but, I just think, this is the restoration of the planet. Really, what are we going back to? We're going back to the Garden of Eden, right? And I think that's so important. We're going to go back to God's original plan. Satan had his fun. He got to mess things up pretty badly, but you know what? God wasn't thrown off. God's like, okay,
that's right.
We'll take the long path. That's fine. We could have gone straight to the promised land, but we took 40 years to get there. Okay, we could have gone straight to Eden, but all right, we took 6,000 years to get there.
Yeah.
And so then Satan's put away for 1,000. Life is pretty awesome. You got animals are happy, people are happy, but there is still the potential for people who do not yet have their new bodies. There's a potential for sin. There's not the widespread practice of that sin, not at all. And if you do, then you're going to find yourself, kicking the bucket pretty early. But there is this potential, and I think even some people will not outwardly sin, so they won't die at 100. But inwardly, oh man, they're a mess, and they're like, I'm just going to bide my time until Satan gets out, and then, or however, if they understand that, who knows, but. Just some things to think about. So, Doug, I know you have to go in just a few minutes. So you tell me exactly when you need to go, but there are a couple questions that I thought would be fun to get to. And
I want to insert one before I leave.
Yeah.
Just on behalf of the animals, I would like to say that at the end of the book of Jonah, and this kind of goes in with Scott a little bit, is that there's 120,000. God's, Jonah's in this gourd that grows up, and it's shading him, and then it dies the same night. And he's really ticked off. And God goes, here's Nineveh, and there's 120,000, which probably the little ones who don't know their right hand from their left hand. And then God also says, and then there's the animals. God's interested in the animals.
Right. And even they had to wear a sackcloth.
The animals and the guys that don't. In other words, the innocents, even the animals, are considered in his sight at that point, and the destruction. And by the way, a man's day shall be 120 years, Scott. There's 120,000 that don't know their left hand from the right, and so we got to consider this, all right?
Yeah. So.
Anyway.
Here's a question that you might enjoy. Tell me if you don't. But the pyramid height is related to golden ratio, not equal to sides. I don't know. Does that?
Well, they're talking about the Fibonacci golden ratio,
right? The Fibonacci.
And what did they say about it?
They say the pyramid height is related to golden ratio, not equal to sides. So I think that was in relation maybe to a comment that I was making. And
on the pyramid,
and I'm totally fine with that. I mean, I'm just sort of taking the average, but I don't think that it has to be necessarily a what do you call it, perfect pyramid or I think there's different ways that God can slice it, but it's generally a pyramidal mountain shape, right? And if it's a little bit taller than your average pyramid, Okay, that's fine with me too.
I know
So,
you're
but it's not a cube. That's
mountain
my
of the
point.
Lord, right? The
Yeah,
mountain of the
it's
Lord.
not a
Yeah,
big
sure.
old
And
cube, you know.
I'm into
So
the mountain of the Lord, but I'm also into the cube. So I'm into both.
I know you are. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Multidimensional thing.
Yeah. So,
Okay, moving on.
this is kind of in relation to what you said, kind of a comment / question. How in the world can anyone believe that Satan is currently bound and
How in the
unable
world can
to
anybody
deceive?
believe that Satan is currently bound and unable to deceive?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Any
How
follow-up
can
thoughts
they?
on that? I don't know. Yeah.
Because they want to believe that.
Ah, there you
It
go.
goes with their narrative.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
It goes with their
Yeah.
narrative, so they got to believe it. And when I
Right.
approach them and say, well, have you been to Nigeria lately? Have you been, have you noticed World Wars I and II? Post-millennialism or amillennialism or, a preterism that believes that, most of them believe millennial is not literal. I think that's a fantasy. I think they're and the problem that they're having, Doug and Scott, is that trying to reconcile this heaven and earth and not being able to think in a multidimensional way. Because there's the heavens and then there's the earth, but there's this ladder that brings them together somehow. We understand it all, but it's there and it's marvelous. And we need to declare that the heavens and the earth are the Lord's. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And
Amen.
hey, I've even had a blast of speaking at flat Earth conferences, and so you've been there too. Hey, right. I can handle saucers.
Well, I'm hosting the first ever pretzel-shaped Earth conference in December.
It better be in the figure 8.
No, it's going to be literally pretzel-shaped, and the theme is God doesn't care what you think about the shape of his Earth conference.
All right, another question on topic. Will Christians live in heaven or new earth or both?
Well,
Brother Krieger?
I think that they're going to be living in both. I mean, why not? The heaven and the earth. Okay. Hey, new heaven, new earth. Why? Because the first heaven and the first earth passed away.
I
So
think
what are you
what they mean by
be, right?
I think what they mean by heaven is what we would call, that you're going to heaven, that kind of experience.
Yeah.
I personally think it's a little bit of a misnomer. I don't think that we're going to be living up yonder by and by, and we've got all of our our
We're
Cadillac
like
pulling into the mansion or something like that. I really think the New Jerusalem is what we call heaven, right? Heaven is the New Jerusalem. That's why I think these two come back together. We very clearly see they come back together.
It comes to earth.
It comes to earth, right? So it's a misnomer to suggest that heaven is out there. Heaven, as in the New Jerusalem, is coming here. Right. And there'll be a time when some people cannot go into the New Jerusalem during that 1,000-year period. But once that 1,000 years is over, everybody who's still around has access to the New Jerusalem, and they can freely come and go at will. Right. Yeah. But you're also on the earth. And that's the part that I think a lot of Christians have discounted as, we're not going to be on the earth anymore. Oh, yes, we are. Earth is our home. Earth is home. And earth is incredibly gorgeous, man. I love this earth. And I can hardly wait to see it when it's even more beautiful.
And God said it was good, right?
And at that point in time, I think we'll be interdimensional, and we can go out and we can look down and we can see if it's pretzel, flat, or a globe. And there won't be any debates at that time.
Brother Doug, you got to go. So why don't we let you go? We're going to hang out. There's a few more questions I want to take, and then we'll call tonight. But thank you so much for joining us. It's really been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoyed being with you guys, and I'm off to have our little Bible study here in Rockland, California. You know where that is, right?
Okay.
And we got about 10 guys that get together, and we just have a blast. We've been going through the book of Romans, and it's just it's such a blessing, and it's a blessing being with you, brother. So God bless you guys, and we'll talk to you later. Amen.
All right. Take care. See you. All right. Very good. So we've got a few more questions. This is from Shemin, kind of a comment. It seems like it is not new versus old. Isn't it rather a different heaven or a different earth? I guess we kind of touch on that. I mean, the word kainos or kainos, depending on your pronunciation, is I think it's going to be more of a renewed. I don't think that we're getting a different earth. I really don't think different is the idea. I think it's the restored, and Romans 8 is where I would point that it's this earth, this ball of dirt that we're on. A ball, yes, I do think it's a ball, but it's going to be put back the way it was supposed to be. So just like I am going to get a new body, but it's still me, right? So it's possible that this body, assuming the Lord doesn't come back sooner, will see corruption. All right. But God is going to collect all my bits. He's going to collect my DNA, whatever it is, and he's going to fashion me a new body. Right. So it'll be the old Doug, but also a new Doug. So I think that'd be pretty cool.
And I would say really what we're looking at there is, are we talking about the seventh day or eternity? And again, that's sort of what we've been discussing. I think some of this stuff might be in the eternal state, which we're not given much information about, as opposed to the seventh day. And there could be some overlap in Revelation 21 and 22 and some of the prophets that point more toward the eternal state. But I just don't think we're given much information about what happens at the conclusion of the next stage when that seventh day ends. But I do believe kind of the only thing we differ on is maybe, does the New Jerusalem literally touch down, or is it brought, or does heaven, does he bring New Jerusalem, which is obviously in the heavens right now, down to our domain in which there can be interaction? And I'll be honest, I would not be dogmatic on this. When we get there, we'll figure it out.
Indeed. Well, so a follow-up comment is the regeneration from Matthew 19:28. So Jesus said to them, "As surely I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." Right. So the key word there, in the regeneration, right? So we're also told in Titus 3:15 that, it's through the washing of the regeneration, right? Concerning my new body, I'm getting a regeneration. And I think regeneration is a super important word. One, because Jesus said it, but two, it's not a different planet. It's the same planet. In fact, there's really, I did a whole presentation on this. If you guys are interested, wrote another book on that, and Corrupting the Image 4 is going to be on this very topic. I can hardly wait, but I got a lot of books to write. Well, so one sec. So in, hold on. I lost my thought. So, bummer. All right, go ahead. I forgot my thought.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I believe there's no doubt that at that future Yom Teruah, in that twinkling of an eye, which I believe as that sixth day turns to the seventh day, that those who are asleep, those who have died, or even those who are alive, we're going to experience sort of like a physical death without going through any sickness or a car accident or anything like that, because our mortal bodies will, in essence, die, and we will become incorruptible. I guess the quibble that we're having is, I don't believe that the elements of the entire universe melt and they're not destroyed. In other words, but there will be a reversal of the curse, if you will. In other words, during the seventh day, during this 1,000-year period, there will be the Earth's going to be wrecked. I mean, it's going to be, it appears it's going to get really, really wrecked. And so I think, I do believe that Yeshua will restore all things during the seventh day, but it may not happen instantly. And we have that passage over in Ezekiel where the people have to actually go out and do some work, where I think it's either in 38 or 39, Doug, where they're actually having to go out and do some cleanup work.
Yeah. And I think that, Scott, I do think, and I see your point. I really do. It would not surprise me if some of that were not taking place in that, extra 1,290 days, that extra 30 days, and then that extra 45 days or 75 days altogether. I do think some of that could be taking place in there. I know it does say 7 months, so that's on me to try to figure that out, which I don't quite have the answer. But the passage that I was thinking about is in, actually, let me just really quickly since I have a whole presentation on this very thing, I'm just going to pull that up. And I made this when PowerPoints were still square. So those are the days. But so praise him, all his angels, all his hosts, sun and moon. Praise him, all you stars of light. Praise him, you heaven of heavens, for he commanded they were created. He also established them forever and ever and made a decree which shall not pass away. Right. So I see that as pretty huge. And then God even says in Jeremiah 31, thus says the Lord who gives the sun for a light by day, the ordinances of the moon and the stars for a light by night, who disturbs the sea, his waves roar. If those ordinances depart from before me, says the Lord, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. So, God is saying, look, that the heavens and earth, those are not, those, the earth, the sun, the moon, he created those forever and ever and ever. And so I think we have to, really harmonize our interpretations based on those passages. All right, another question. Can you explain Revelation 2:17? What is the white stone and new name? Joining late, sorry if you already went there. Well, we didn't actually go there. The white stone and the new name seem to be related in ancient history. That this was basically, you're given a white stone, which is kind of like a fresh slate. That was the basic idea. All right, this is from Brian. Since Revelation says John saw no temple there, I just find it hard to reconcile with a New Jerusalem starting the millennium. So, Brian, the way I reconcile that is if you look in Revelation chapter 3, it says that there is a temple in the New Jerusalem currently. All right. And assuming God is in the New Jerusalem, which I think is a pretty good assumption, where do we find God currently? He is in this temple, right? Isaiah chapter 6, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, right? And the train of his robe filled the temple, right? And the doorposts were shaken and the seraphim were saying, Kadosh, 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 right? All of that's happening in the temple, all right, which is the same temple that Jesus talked about in Revelation 2 and 3. And then it even says in Revelation 15 that no one could enter into the temple or the holy place until the final plagues were completed, right? So there is a temple in the New Jerusalem currently. And then John is surprised to see that there is no temple in chapter 21. So something happened. So my theory, and again, I can't absolutely prove this, but my theory is that temple that's currently there is going to be moved down to the planet. And it even says in Zechariah or Zephaniah that Messiah is going to build the temple. So I think Jesus is actually going to build the real temple, not the tribulation temple or whatever that thing is going to be. But there's going to be a temple that he will build. It will be on the planet. And I think it's currently in the New Jerusalem currently. And look, if people can move London Bridge over to Lake Havasu, I think they can. God can move a building as well. I don't think that's too hard for God. So this is from Hawkeyes. Oh yeah, Scott. Sorry.
Yeah, on that, I mean, again, I guess, and it just comes from my most recent study in the past 2 weeks, getting ready for our discussion we had this past week. I'm seeing that on that throne is Yeshua. In other words, as opposed to the Father, if you will. So yes, when he returns, that's where I would quibble a little bit, because no man can see the Father, no man can see Yah's all his face, if you will. No man can because that's where the blinding light. But even in his glorified state, Yeshua is not going to, when he returns, is not going to fry humans, because they're all going to come up to the King. They're going to come up to King Yeshua. There's still a limited. Yeshua is all of Yah, but he's still limiting himself in this time domain. And we're still going to be in the time domain in the seventh day. We're still within the creation, if you will, like in this creation bubble. As I like to think of it. It can be a square, it can be a pyramid, it can be a circle, and everything else out of that is what we don't have a clue about. So, but anyway, that was just some more, who is it that's on that throne? I believe that's Yeshua on the throne that everybody saw, not the Father, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I would agree with you. Here's a question from Hawkeyes. If the new heaven and new earth are at the start, then that would mean Hasatan is released in the new heaven and the new earth. Is that correct? Yes, that is definitely my theory. And, again, Satan was on this planet when he made a muck of it, right? In the Garden of Eden, right? But it takes action on the part of humans to really mess it up. Okay. So he obviously had some nefarious plans in his heart when he went into the Garden of Eden and did his whole thing. But it took Adam and Eve to execute that, right? It was in their court that they had to make this decision. And I would suggest a similar kind of thing is going to happen during the millennium. So another question, Scott, let me know if you wanted to join in.
yeah, I'll take this one first.
Okay, go for it.
If the church is gathered prior to the start of the seventh day, who do you think are the initial humans at the start of the seventh day? Is it both the later saved and unsaved humans who live through this the wrath? And Doug and I think, are 100% in alignment. This is going to be Judah, who will look to or upon him whom they pierced. We see that in Zechariah. They have not taken the mark and worshipped the image of the beast. They had not necessarily placed their faith in Yeshua yet, but they're not going to be destroyed, and they'll be protected until what I like to say is Yom Kippur, or Judgment Day, sheep and goats judgment. And the same thing, there has to be those of the nations as well who have not taken the mark and worshiped the image of the beast, who have survived through this time period, even survived the wrath of God as it's poured out in the bowl judgments. And those would be the humans over this 10-day period. In other words, our pre-trib brothers would teach that we have to be raptured out of here. And then that's why the church is raptured out of here, and someone has to populate the millennium. So that's got to be the Jews, and that's got to be Israel. And they're and again, Doug and I sort of agree with him to a certain extent, but we condensed that time frame down to about 10 days. 10 days between the gathering of Israel. And again, I believe that gathering, and this kind of dovetails in we're in now, I believe that gathering is to the cloud, which would be the heavens. In other words, Yeshua has come on the cloud. He's in the heavens still, but it ain't very far away. And this is before on Yom Kippur, I believe, when he actually touches down on Mount of Olives. And so, yes, those people would be what you would call those that are not going to be entering into the kingdom in their immortal, incorruptible bodies, but those would be the ones that are making it in their mortal bodies, if you will. So I might have added some things that you don't align with, Doug, but I know we do believe in that 10-day period.
Yeah. I mean, exactly how it happens on the timing thing is, it's always interesting. We never know exactly, but yeah, I would suggest that we're going to have, three groups of people: those that take the mark, those that don't take the mark, and those who don't take the mark. And those who don't take the mark, of course, they're Christians, right? They're healthy believers in Yeshua, and those that don't take the mark and they're not believers. All right. And so I would think the people that don't take the mark and are not believers, but are kind of the righteous Gentiles, so to speak, these are the people that will reproduce during this time.
It's interesting too. We could do a discussion on this, and I don't want to get off into John MacArthur land, but the text, I'm a big fan of actually what the text says. And the text says those who take the mark of the beast and worship his image. There is a conjunction there. And by the way, I'm not advocating anybody taking the mark of the beast when it's implemented. Okay. I'm just saying the text does not say everybody. When we teach on this and talk about this, we always say that we took the mark of the beast. The text says took the mark of the beast all the time and worshiped his image. So anyway, but by the way, guys, again, just so I'm clear, don't take the mark of the beast when it comes on the scene.
There you go. Good idea. Yeah, good idea. Yeah. Oh, well, that's awesome. Let's see here. We've, of course, got more questions, but we're really out of time. So, guys, if you have questions, I'd encourage you Let's see. I hate missing questions because they're so much fun, but I just don't want to take too much. Let's do maybe one more here. There was one. Hold on. There we go. Okay.
I didn't do anything.
Okay. Sorry. Why will the tree of all manner of fruits for the healing of the nations be necessary? Will it still be still be there in the new earth after the millennium? If so, why won't we be eternal then? Well, so yeah, I mean, I would suggest that people that are not yet in their new bodies, the means by which they can be transformed, since they don't have to go through death, and there's no resurrection for them per se. The way that they do that is by taking the tree of life. Now, in the eternal state, probably it's just going to be yummy and you eat it and it's amazing. I can't really comment on that, but we're told specifically that those who keep the commandments will have the right to enter in through the gates into the city and take the tree of life. Okay. Or take the tree of life and enter into the city. So we're told very specifically, Revelation 22:14, that the tree of life is absolutely necessary to go into the New Jerusalem. So it serves very much a purpose. Again, after all death, all sin, everything's done away, after Satan's put away, and we're in the eternal state, then it probably just becomes a delicious tree, I'm guessing. So, yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So guys, if we didn't get to your question, maybe hold it for next time. We do like to take, just have times we take questions. So fantastic. But thank you again. We're definitely over time, but we're glad that you joined us. And again, we want to just, encourage you to keep Michael Heiser's family in prayer. If you didn't know, he recently passed. So that's very tragic, and we are sad to lose him. But yeah. Anyway, well, thank you guys. We're glad you joined us. And until next time, make sure to stay in the Word. Good night.